Squad balance, a thing that we've talked about, but haven't really seen this far in the season. Part of this comes down to the fact that so many of our players can make the starting lineup or bench at any match, but Callum Hudson-Odoi and Fikayo Tomori's absence over the past few matches is causing some alarm among Chelsea fans. Matt, what, if anything, should we read into this? Are there problems brewing? Like, what's going on?
Look, because of the size of the squad, which we've spoken about before, and it's
Mm.
clearly bigger than Frank would ideally like. Um, every single selection he makes every week, there's going to be an omission from the squad who you could make a case for them being pretty unhappy about it. We've had Rudiger for weeks now. He's back in the squad. They can't have two central defenders on the bench, really. There's no real point, particularly with Aspie in there who can fill in all over the place. So this time it was Tomori and obviously Callum as well. And again, because now Ziyech is fit and the options they've got going forward, there's pretty much always going to be an attacking player. I mean, some weeks it might be one of the two strikers who's not on the bench. Some weeks it might be one of the wide players who's not on the bench. I think we're going to have to get used to this, though, for certainly up until January, that there's always going to be a kind of surprise not in the squad because you can't put them all in the squad. It's simple as that. So I think it's dangerous to read too much into it on the back of one. I think it's interesting that Rudiger was back in. I think it's a shame for Tomori. I mean, I wrote about him in my newsletter. I think he's been unlucky not to get more starts. His stats are quite good. He's reacted well to the disappointment of not going on loan. I'm told there's no problem behind the scenes. So I think he's a little bit unlucky. Callum Hudson-Odoi is an interesting one because we do seem to be stuck in a bit of a rut with Callum in that every time he's not playing, his camp, and I should stress it's not Callum himself, but his camp tend to start getting a little bit busy with stories about maybe moving on again. And you do fear if he's not in a couple of squads, that will start to raise its head again. And I hope it doesn't. I hope they calm the situation down and are willing to put their foot on the ball a little bit. But yeah, I mean, even when Frank, I think, settles on sort of his first choice 11 or first choice 12 or 13, shall we say, I still think there'll be a lot of rotation within that squad and that bench because there just kind of has to be. It's just the situation he's in with the size of the squad.
When you look at it with Tomori and now Rudiger kind of coming in this weekend, you mentioned it's a little interesting kind of inclusion back in. I think Fikayo would have expected if he didn't go on loan, which I mean, maybe the way West Ham are playing recently, he would not have started there. But I think it looked in general that he would potentially at least get starting minutes there with some level of regularity. Do you think that there's going to be an onus on Frank to try to get him into the squad versus someone like Rudiger? Or like, why would Rudiger kind of be back on the bench at this point?
So what I'm told with Rudiger is that there's been some constructive talks quite recently. I don't think there'd been a huge fallout, but let's be honest. He's a German international. He's not going to take well to not being in the squad. So I think there was a bit of work to do on the relationship there, shall we say? And from what I hear, there's been some constructive talks between them in terms of let's get to January. I think Lampard's promised him to take a real look at him, whether it be in training or whether he gets some minutes in a game, and certainly get him back on the bench a bit more and give him more of an opportunity to try and win his place back. I think Rudiger, on the other hand, has also promised up until January to not be any sort of disruptive influence in the background, to try and remain a positive influence. Obviously, we know he can be positive. He helped Werner and Kai Havertz join. He's got a good relationship with those guys. He's a loud, bubbly character when he's in the right mood. He's one of the louder characters in that squad. So I also think that Frank will be thinking, look, I'd want this guy on my side at least until January. So I'm told that's happened up until now, which is probably why he's back in the Man U squad. I expect him to be in more squads now, not necessarily every single squad, because I'd be surprised if Frank just cut Tomori adrift. But they're in a real kind of strange rotation, those two, in terms of who plays and who doesn't play. And, well, not even who plays and who doesn't play, who's in the squad and who's not in the squad. And they're both going to have to be quite patient. I feel really sorry for Fikayo because he had an Everton loan move arranged, which he and Chelsea, I think, at one stage were quite excited about. They thought it would be really good for his development. that had to be cancelled because of the situation that came up with Rudiger. And then when it went back in his favour because it didn't look like Rudiger was going to leave very late in the window, it was really too late. They couldn't find a move. West Ham came up. West Ham, as you just said, weren't actually promising him minutes. I think you're right. I don't think he'd actually be playing for West Ham at the moment. I think he'd probably be on the bench, albeit maybe closer to the first team than he currently is at Chelsea. And you can't go to West Ham on loan and not play. That'd be far worse than staying at Chelsea and not playing. So it's a really tricky one. But I do think the Rudiger news at the moment, and as long as it stays constructive and this doesn't change in the next couple of weeks, I think that's good news for Chelsea and Lampard up until January.
So we know there are a bunch of fixtures coming up. We'll talk about them in a second. But as it pertains to some of these fringe, kind of squad players right now, is there any sense that there's going to be enough squad rotation for everyone to get some minutes moving forward, or is Frank trying to really just settle on the 17 that he needs for matches?
It's going to be difficult because going out the Carabao Cup has really taken away the opportunity to use the squad a lot. And I think Krasnodar will be interesting. Of all the European games they've got, whether you risk a Thiago Silva, for instance, against Krasnodar, I'm really not sure. So I'd have thought that game might present a few opportunities. But yeah, you don't see a point in the fixture list that makes it that easy for him to really give minutes to some fringe players because of that Carabao Cup defeat until the FA Cup starts, really. Because the situation they're on, they've got some nice looking fixtures coming up in the league where, had they have started very strong results-wise, you might think, okay, you might juggle it around a bit. But I think they know now with this good set of fixtures coming up that they really need to do everything they can to try and take maximum points out the next 3 or 4 or 5 games to really get on a run. And you don't see them rotating too much to do that. Although, I mean, look, Frank does spring surprises. I've got to be honest, I didn't see the 3 at the back come in against Man United. In hindsight, you can see why he did it, and in hindsight, it looks sensible, and you kind of think to yourself, should have seen that one come in. But there were no clues there. Frank does juggle things around. I saw an article not long ago calling him the new Tinkerman, and he can be a bit like that.
It's interesting, out of every manager that he's worked with, that Ranieri would be the one that would give him, imprint upon him. That would be the most interesting thing to come of that. As it relates to, and maybe just kind of tie off here, so it sounds like, at least right now then, the center back depth chart has kind of shifted a little bit to be Thiago Silva as 1, Kurt Zouma 2, now Rudiger as 3, and then somewhere between Christensen and Fikayo as the 4-5, and that could switch on the day?
Difficult to make it. After the first 2, it's difficult, I still think, because you're working between formations. Mm-hmm. Clearly, he fancies Aspie as that third centre back in a 3, but obviously you wouldn't see Aspie being the third centre back choice as a 4 because he doesn't play in a back 4. I'm told, and look, Frank has not confirmed this to me whatsoever, or confirmed this on the record anyway. I'm told that they are wary of the partnership of Silva and Christensen together. So I'm not expecting to see that partnership. So once you get past the first 2, it might be about partnerships. Yeah, and this may be where Rudiger comes in a little bit again as well, because if you're saying that that Silva and Zouma are my first 2, and you're also thinking, not sure I fancy Andreas Christensen and Silva as a partnership for whatever reason, then Christensen, obviously, if there's a place next to Silva, then maybe you're going straight to Rudiger rather than and going over Christensen. Whereas if Silva's out, he quite likes that Christensen-Zouma partnership, even though I don't particularly like it myself. And I think a lot of fans don't like it. But it feels like maybe Christensen-Zouma is ahead of Rudiger-Zouma. So it's such a difficult one. It's all about partnerships as well as just personnel.